Thanks for tuning into this podcast. Please be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends in education so they too can be strengthened and encouraged in living their kingdom identity out loud in this pivotal hour. And please visit kingdomeducators.com to receive your Kingdom Educator Daily Truth Declarations, my encouraging newsletter, and be the first to know about my newest resources online and in-person events. And be sure to find me on the socials at kingdom.educators. Until next time, don't forget you are a history maker, and what you do every day is transforming lives.
Hey everybody, I am having a really fun, candid conversation here with Bekah Hutchinson. She is a second grade teacher in Southern Washington, and we met this last summer, and I think she is amazing. She's also a member of Christian Educators, and she helps host Awake events, which you heard a story from Heather Conan last week about how that all got started. But we want to wrap up this whole teacher self-care unit that I've been on. And Bekah's been on this journey of, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Bekah,
Okay.
of stepping into this new space of asking the Lord what he thinks, but even deeper than that, Lord, how do you see me? And so asking the Lord about our identity. So we're just going to have a candid conversation with you this week.
All right, I'm in.
So here we are. I know, Bekah, that you have been deep with a lot of Jamie Winship material on true identity and exchanging lies for truth.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
Let's talk about it. It's bananas. I would say this summer, Jamie Winship came and spoke at a retreat that we were at, and it literally rocked my world. And when you talk about like self-care and taking care of yourself, I would say this is probably the deepest, most intimate self-care you can do. I really do believe that. I didn't know that before, but I'm learning it. Jamie Winship's work is based on like the identity of who God made us to be, and asking like, do you know who you are? Are there lies you believe about yourself? And he really dives into like, God designed us with a unique identity, and it's fueled by his love and knowledge of who he made us to be. And what gets in the way of that is our fear. And so what I'm learning this summer is that, and throughout this year, is that there is self-care really looks like truth telling, being honest and saying, this is what I'm afraid of, and giving it to Jesus and saying, this is what I'm afraid of. This is my fear. This is my truth telling. And then receiving the truth and giving the lies. I guess some would call it confession. Some would call it truth telling. But in giving the lies, you're laying down something that has kept you in a negative space or in a space that isn't good. And you ask, what do you say about me? And who do you say I am? And that ultimately shifts, in my opinion, everything. I mean, the way that I saw myself, the way that I saw others, I had no idea how much fear was speaking to me. And I had no idea how much I was believing it. And so the self-care piece and coming back to Jamie's work was really like, I had these lies, like, what will people think? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I don't know what to do? And in my own personal life, like, what if I can't meet this need? Or what if I'm not good enough? It's our whole lives. We live in kind of a what if culture. And so during this retreat, we practiced truth telling. And first I have to say, I have fallen in love with confession and truth telling. I've fallen in love with it because, I'm not going to cry, but
that's okay.
It's, I really experienced that, like, confession really just is when you get anything that's in the way of you knowing God, you're giving it back to him. It's not this weird thing that I think a lot of us grew up with. It's just being honest and saying, this is where I'm at. This is how I feel. This is what I'm believing. And then allowing God to speak to that and allowing his mercies to come in and say, this is the truth. So I have a lot of gratitude. This is my, like, that God doesn't get tired of us coming to him in confession. He doesn't ever tire of it. And it's such good self-care because you bring it to him and he speaks the truth. So that's a lot of talking, but I started with confession. And the first piece of identity that I felt like God spoke over me, I was a delightful breath of life.
That's so precious.
So I feel like my response should have been similar to yours, but this is what happened. If I'm honest, I panicked. And it felt so far from how I viewed myself and like how I saw the world. And also, seriously, delightful breath of life. Like, that's what you're going to say about me? Like,
wow.
It was very counterintuitive to so many of my experiences growing up and in my life.
Yeah.
And I just was like, that can't be God. And I realized, you know what? It couldn't have been me. Like, I would not have used that word. Like, isn't that so God? He like chooses something that
we can't make up.
We can't make up. Like, that's how he works, right? Something that I wouldn't choose for myself is exactly what God speaks over me. And it's so powerful and real that all I can do is say, well, I know that wasn't me. Like, I wouldn't say that, you know?
Yes.
So it was so, like, as I've gone on, he's added pieces to that, but it has shifted so many things, because as I walk into a room or as I am driving somewhere, I find myself saying, okay, God, help me to be a delightful breath of life. Help me to walk in this identity. If this is who you created me to be, show me what this would look like to those around me. Like, it changed my view of, you know, my classroom, my family, everything, because I realized, like, I had been believing a lie. I think that I was an accident, that I was a burden, right? You can't be a burden if you're a delightful breath of life. They don't go together, right? So laying down the burden, the lie that, like, I was a burden, allowed that truth to come in and say, oh, not only are you not a burden, but you're a delightful breath of life. This is who you are. So you might as well live it. Like, you know, so yeah. So that was my kind of first experience, but.
Ooh, that's really powerful. I was even thinking yesterday, I was reading in the last part of Hebrews 3 and into chapter 4, and it's talking about basically laboring to enter into his rest. And that to enter into rest, we have to believe, and we have to let go of the sin of unbelief. And I was thinking about, you know, over each of our lives, God has these purposes and plans that he pre-planned before we were even born to execute through our lives. And like Ephesians 2 talks about that he seated us in heavenly places above all powers and principalities, power and dominion, but he put himself in us to bring himself glory, that we're glory carriers. And I was just like, Lord, I just felt like he was convicting places in my own heart where it was like, God, I feel like I'm supposed to move to this new place inside of my own thinking, but I'm struggling with not believing, and you're calling unbelief a sin. And I don't want to live in sin, because I want to walk into the promised land. I don't want to be like the Israelites that received manna for 40 years, yet they didn't believe in your provision. And it could be anything in our lives, about provision of for our emotions, provisions for our friends, provision for what the million things we need in our classroom, or family things, or like for me, my kids coming back to Jesus, or, you know, there's myriads of things we could think about. But it just really brought me to this place of like, God, taking my name that you gave me is radical culture shifter. But if I can't believe radically, quote unquote, to step into a space and see what you have, even though it doesn't make any sense to me, or I'm afraid about what the new thing is that you have me to step into, I can't really walk in the fullness of my identity. So it really is, Bekah, like you said, him exposing things in us and truth telling, and just being able to have the freedom to let ourselves have the freedom to be able to lay down that thing before the altar and just say, Jesus, I give you my unbelief, or whatever it is. If there's like a release, I feel like that happens inside of us where we might feel stuck and bottled up. But just me journaling that out yesterday, and then I spent some more time in the Word and worshiping, and it was like, oh my gosh, I'm so much better now.
Yeah, because you heard the truth.
Yes,
right?
Yeah.
Because you heard the truth. You know, one of the things I was really impacted by that Jamie said this summer, he talked about how he wakes up in the morning and the first thing he says is, okay, I'm afraid of this. Like, he just gets it out there. He like confesses it because he knows that then God can come in and speak the truth.
That's really
good. I think that, like, when we live with this space and we're afraid, I mean, even you telling the Lord, like, okay, I'm afraid. I see you opening this door, but I'm afraid, right? Allows him to come in and, you know, speak his truth. And
or just even that it's okay to tell the Lord what we're afraid of during the day instead of being afraid that, because I think a lot of times, even if, especially if we've grown up in the church, we have this idea of like, I got to be the good Christian who has everything put together and I can always say I'm fine. And I can't dare tell God what my problems are, even though we all know he knows, but we can't say it because, oh my gosh, then we'd be admitting that we're not all together. And he's like, would you just come to me, not put together? Like your hair's down, your tears are everywhere, you're a little
Yes.
scraped up. Would you just come to me and then I'll tell you who you are and then the healing will just come.
Yes, because how we see ourselves is not how he sees us.
Yeah.
Right. So we have this, like, it's like I was saying, he doesn't tire of us coming to him in confession because he sees the truth. Right. And we get stuck in these lies, but he's like, no, come. He says, come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Like, this is my gift to you. Take my yoke upon you. It's light. And we keep picking up these burdens and living in this space of trying to do it ourselves. And God is saying, no, like what I give you is truth. Just live in it. It's okay to be you. It's okay to live in the gifts that I've given you, you know.
That makes me think too of a funny quote from Graham Cook. If anybody knows about him, I love his books and resources, but he has this funny saying where we sometimes can get caught up in not telling God what's really going on, even though he knows. And he says, well, don't worry. I don't have any illusions about you because I wasn't disillusioned in the first place. He already knows. And he's like, won't you just come and let me shake off that burden?
Can I take that from you?
He doesn't have any illusions about us. But it is so just a encouragement that if you have time, listener, like go and read Ephesians 1:17 through like 2 verse 7. It just talks about like how God wants to give us the spirit of wisdom and revelation and the knowledge of Jesus and to know the hope that we've been called to. And then he just goes into this space of like, he really wants to use us to display his glory. He wants to show the world it could not happen apart from me. That's kind of exciting because that means he wants to show up in a clear way to the people around us in our classrooms, our families. Like sometimes our families are the hardest places, I think, because it's the closest to us. But like God wants to show up in crazy ways where it's like, that's not her, or that's not him. That's me. That's all me. And it could not be done without me. Woo, Lord, help us to be ready vessels, open containers. Yes, come show up and do crazy things in me, through me.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think that's the part that's really impacted me this year is I don't have to be or do anything except who he created me to be and do. Like, so his identity, when he speaks, like when he spoke, you're a delightful breath of life. I walk into a room and I realize like, oh, that's my identity. I don't have to show up and bring anything. I don't have to be any different than I am because that's who he's created us to be. Right. So when I walk into a staff meeting or when I walk into, you know, somewhere, I can just walk in that and trust that he's going to bring his life to that. Right. I think we put this pressure on ourselves to look a certain way, especially in the church, right? Look this way. Or, you know, one of the things that I've really learned through this is that because truth telling brings freedom happens in community, right? Community with Jesus, community with each other. And I think a big part of self-care is being able to truth tell in community and being able to share, this is who I really am. And recognizing that this is not only is this who I am, but this is exactly who Jesus loves. I don't have to whitewash anything. I don't have to be anything else. I can be who I am. And you know what? I've learned when I show up like that, it frees other people to show up like that. And then we begin to walk in our identity together. And we begin to like open spaces, even in deep grief or in deep laughter, or, I mean, there's this huge, you know, chasm of where you're at. But that when we walk together in community like that, we open up spaces for people to walk in their identities because they're truth telling, right? We're showing up as we are. And so God can move in that space and speak in that space. So,
that's beautiful. So we just need to find people that are safe and willing to go there with us.
And honestly, I'll be really transparent. Like, again, I have to go back to when you say like, we need to find people, I remember sitting down a couple years ago and going, okay, God, who are my people? Bring them. Like, I know I can't find them. I don't have the power to, and then you sit back and you watch and you say, wow, look at this. Look at what God has done. Right now. That sounds really beautiful and streamlined. It never looks like that. It's very messy. And there's all these pieces where your heart is crushed because you showed up and, but the thing is, I've also learned that even in the messiest places, God is a God of redemption. And so nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted. And when we show up and we say yes and we listen and receive and walk in our identity, nothing is wasted. And things even that we think are wasted are not wasted. So
that is a reminder for us.
It is.
Nothing is wasted. That he uses it all for our good and his glory.
Yeah. And
it's
even
really
when
good.
We think we've made mistakes, it's not wasted. Like you think about, I was just thinking the other day about Peter and how he denied Jesus 3 times, right? Then he's sitting there and Jesus says, Peter, do you love me? And it's 3 different kinds of love. But I'm thinking that is in the Bible. And we are all learning from probably his lowest point in his life. And we all glean from that. Like anyone who has read that story has learned from that story, right? It's not wasted. It's real. It's in the moment. But it was probably what he would consider his deepest failure. And it's when I look at that story, I always see like one of God's deepest redemptions. Like look at how he powerfully used this. Like Peter became the rock of the church out of that brokenness. Right? I think we have this idea that we have to be or do something. And I'm really leaning into understanding, even in learning my identity, making mistakes is not beyond God, right? Yeah. So even my mistakes become God's redemption. Like he can walk into those things and use those pieces that I see from my perspective. He sees from such a different perspective. Like it didn't take him by surprise when Peter denied him, but he was able to use that story to show people, this is the brokenness this is who you are. This is the brokenness of who you are. Let me speak to you who you truly are. Let me give you your identity of who you truly are.
That's really good. So self-care is all about telling truth and letting the Lord speak into where we're at and what he sees about us. And don't be surprised when he shows up like he has for Bekah and I, about showing you who you are and continues to show you who you are. And you just write down those names. In fact, we were talking earlier about our kids doing a little bit of identity exchange too, and needing to write those, at least for my daughter, needing to write those names down and calling them out in our kids. And then this will be on a whole nother podcast, I hope, Bekah. But at some point, I'd love to have you come back and share more about helping kids truth tell at school and what that looks like in public education, and how we can easily introduce kids to the voice of true love, which we know, according to the book of John, that Jesus is love. And so we are referring them to the voice of Jesus, and they can hear really easily. I have experienced this even as a substitute. It's really fast.
It is fast.
And it's fun.
And you know, the amazing part, God always shows up. He always shows up. I think we have the fear that he's not going to, but he always does.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to wrap up this quick self-care check-in with everybody. And don't forget to leave a review of Kingdom Educators Podcast so that other teachers can get a hold of this. That's how the algorithm works, folks. So I'd love to have like your own little shout out. That'd be awesome. And see you guys next week.
Thanks for tuning into this podcast. Please be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends in education so they too can be strengthened and encouraged in living their kingdom identity out loud in this pivotal hour. And please visit kingdomeducators.com to receive your Kingdom Educator Daily Truth Declarations, my encouraging newsletter, and be the first to know about my newest resources, online and in-person events. And be sure to find me on the socials at kingdom.educators. Until next time, don't forget you are a history maker, and what you do every day is transforming lives.